Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Asad Lalji. Welcome to Avid Online. Please refer to the chat box for more information on Avid Learning and our partners for this evening. Avid Online was launched on the 1st of April 2020 in a direct response to the pandemic. So now we're 18 months old, and over 275 programs later, we can say that although 2020 and 2021 have challenged us in unprecedented ways, we continue to champion and bring to our audiences the best of the arts and culture and stay true to our mantra that learning never stops. I strongly believe in the power of the arts to impact change. And as environmental concerns continue to grow worldwide, we at Avid find it imperative to shed some light on such issues and leverage our platform to educate and spread awareness by communicating through the arts. With that curatorial vision, we launched the Sustainability Now series in April of last year, a thematized and targeted series of discussion that aims to convert audiences into change makers and active catalysts and custodians for a greener future. In this series, we have presented over 60 change makers and speakers and over 45 programs. We've investigated topics such as architecture and urbanism, tourism, technology, museums, fashion, the future of food. We've also presented an environmental film festival that featured films driven by sustainability and environmental consciousness. Please do check out our YouTube channel for our archives. And we actually plan to continue these conversations. We're launching a dedicated new microsite very shortly and a very special children's book to be launched next month. And that brings me to our evening session. The Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj Vastu Sangralaya and Avid Learning present the next edition of Sustainability Now, Arts for Wildlife Conservation, which will look at the significant role the visual and the performing arts play in responding to environmental issues and crises. Allow me to introduce the evening speakers. Artist, photographer, founding director, Top 6 Links, Ravi Agarwal. Founder Director, Sustainable Alternatives for Rural Accords, SARA, Arunkumar AG. Filmmaker Priya, Thuvassery. Filmmaker and founder, Untamed Planet, Malaika. And they will be in conversation with actor, director, and creative consultant, Anahita Oberoi. For more about our very impressive speakers, please refer to their bios that have been posted in the chat section. They should have been emailed to you earlier also. These speakers will look at the various ways in which the arts lend their support to conservation efforts, addressing the power of the arts to connect with humankind on a deeper level, and they will elaborate on some of the ways artists are devoting their work to support the cause of conservation. Please note, this session will last 75 minutes, followed by a 15-minute Q&A, in which Anahita will be taking questions, so do keep them coming. Keep posting them in the Q&A box throughout. On that note, thank you once again for tuning in. Over to you, Anahita, to level set and look forward to a fascinating session. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Asad and Avid, for putting together this series of talks. It really, truly is the need of the hour. And while environmentalists have been screaming about these issues for so many years, it's just wonderful to see people from different walks of life giving sustainability a serious thought. So for this hour, we've been toying with so many different notions of how the arts are connected to the environment. And our planet basically relies on the ecological balance that governs and directly impacts many diverse environmental aspects. So loss of biodiversity and destruction of natural habitats are a direct threat to maintaining this balance. The extinction of one species of plants and animals in one particular ecosystem can potentially have dire consequences for the entire local ecosystem. And this ripple effect can also be felt in other ecosystems across different regions, and its impact on human activities, both from a natural as well as an economic perspective, is significant. Now, the arts have always had a very strong bond with nature from the very beginning of time, whether it's poetry or painting, music, writing, dance, theater. Artists have always been in awe of nature, and this has reflected in their work through the ages. The arts have the power to move people, to raise awareness and support, shape opinions and perspectives, and draw attention to urgent issues of our planet. So, in this hour together, we will explore the connection and relationship between nature conservation and the arts, and how can various disciplines within the arts be used to spread messages of sustainability. Our speakers who operate with different initiatives in different regions, all with one common theme of wildlife conservation. I'm really happy and looking forward to spending some time chatting with these four amazing, I should say, artists in the larger sense of the word. Thank you, Arun Kumar, Ravi, Priya, and Malaika, for your fabulous creative work and for all your energy in not just your craft, but also in carrying the awareness forward. So let's begin by each of you coming forward, and I'd like to invite each of you to share with us your journey as an artist and human being, and how you stumble upon nature and the environment as your muse, really as your muse. Your concept of conservation, how you were introduced to it. Also, it would be great if you could explain the meaning of the environment to each of you. I know that this sounds like a very long set of questions, but these questions I have shared with the four of them, so they are prepared for this. Um, should we begin with Arun Kumar?
Yeah, thank you, Avid Learning and Anaita, for this conversation. So I come from the Western Ghats of Karnataka region, and that's where I was born and brought up, and that's where my family home is there. And so that region still teaches me so much every day. So I went to art school in Baroda, and then still I went to my region. Uh, what I had been seeing right from my childhood, so much has changed over the last 40-45 years. The earliest record in 1973 shows our region, Shumaga district of Western Ghats of Karnataka, was about 43% of forest cover. And in 2012, records shows only 23% of forest cover. So we can see that even in the last 10 years, maybe half of that must have gone. So, that since I come from there and my family and farm, everything is there. So it becomes my, foremost responsibility to address this as an artist. So that's what I have been doing, having a small a center for knowledge and environment, and it's called SARA, Sustainable Alternatives for Rural Accord. So through that center, along with my art practice, I have been addressing and learning very basic issues on the ground. So, I mean, and this center is also a kind of platform for researchers and artists and anybody who likes to come and spend time and understand the local the ecology and issues, and if they have any way of addressing it, that is what it is for. So that is my short introduction, and I
Mm, thank you so much, Arun. Priya, shall we go with you next?
Sure. Thank you, Avid Learning and Anahita. So, I am a filmmaker. I'm based in Delhi, coming from South Kerala. I've been working with television and media for very long, but filmmaking, especially non-fiction documentaries, was always my passion and love. And never, like, if I look back 2 years back, I would have never thought I'll be sitting in such a platform, or I wouldn't have even called myself someone working in this field of area. It was just like exactly how you said, and it was just stumbling upon a topic. I was more interested in gender and women issues, etc.
Right.
And I fell in love with this woman, Uma Mani, who's a painter, diver, and she actually fell in love with coral reefs and started diving in her 50s. And that led to a film called Coral Woman. And when I started the film, I thought that I am going to make a happy, beautiful film, Coral Reefs, because we are so fascinated by the blues which Discovery Channel or Nat Geo has shown you. And then started my pledge. It was like a non-swimmer diver making an underwater film. And that led to Gulf of Mannar, where my film is located. It's a marine national park, and I got exposed to what is happening there. And that making of the film completely changed who I am as an individual as well as an artist. And then when I looked back into even my work, I felt that nature and environment was always there, because when you do anything with ground, when you do anything with ground reality and community, that link is always there. Even in my film, which was called Survey Number Zero, which was about the Agarias, which are the salt farmers from Gujarat, even they had a land right issue, or they had a issue of, like, there is a wild ass sanctuary, and the relationship between the wild ass and the community, and how the outsiders or the government or authorities felt that they are actually threatening the wild ass, whereas there was a coexistence. So it was actually Coral Woman which made me also realize that even in my other works, even if it is a film about a tribal community from Wayanad, the relationship with the nature, animals, and that was definitely there. So it was like a different reflection. And after Coral Woman, it was very tough for me to just move on to another film. The films happened even after that, but there was an urge that, a conscious effort that something need to be done, because that experience was very different, because I had seen myself changing after it. And I felt as a responsibility that, okay, if I really believe the power of an artist working in this form, and if art can do something, let me just do it. So that responsibility, or that feeling stayed with me. And I think that continued with Coral Woman Impact, which we are still doing, which I'll be happy to discuss more in this
Yes.
session.
Thank you, Priya. Ravi, would you like to take the plunge?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Thank you, Anita, and thank you, Avid, for inviting me, and CSMBS for participating in this. The earliest memories I have of my very early childhood, two distinct images of me playing with squirrels in my parents' home backyard, and the desert, Thar desert, barren, sandy landscape in my grandmother's house in Rajasthan. And these images actually have become defining kind of engagements in my life. And I'm talking when I was 8 or 9 years old. And later on, when I was 13, I took up photography, and I got totally immersed in it. But it was a while going through a whole series of formal educations of another sort before I came to activism. And it started with my forays into the Delhi, where I used to take children for walks, and it led to a campaign which some of us led in the early 90s to save the Delhi Rich Forest, and we managed to save 8,000 hectares of Delhi's forest, because they're now not development but forest land by law. And the other landscape which I got very involved in was bird watching, and the first bird I watched was a white-tailed wagtail on the Yamuna riverbank, where later the fly ash pond of the Indraprastha power station came to be. And again, that led to my involvement in river landscapes, both as an environmentalist, but also as a photographer, as an artist. So somehow all these worlds came together for me because they just won't leave me. And despite my other kind of completely different education and early career, which I then just shed because it shed me actually. So it sort of defined my life. And my for the last said almost 20, 30 years, my relationship, both in my work in our work in a teamwork in Toxics Link, looking at issues of toxicity because, and we started looking at that in the early 90s because nobody else was. And we said, how do we bring value to the table? How do we bring something we can contribute? So it wasn't that we were only thinking of that, but that's where we could say something which nobody else was saying. And then as an artist, uh, and now I'm curating a show at the CS where MVS and the Girls Institute, where Arun is also is one of the artists in that. It's called New Natures. So it's become a multifaceted. It occupies all my time, all my writings, curation, artwork, engagements, and over the years, my engagements have deepened in terms of looking at thinking of what the causes of this, because we think of today, the UN Secretary General said day before that we had the climate red or something we are in the crisis. And I think that we shouldn't call it a crisis anymore because it is a crisis, something which you don't expect. This is a climate condition. This is an environmental condition. It's been many hundred years in the making. And today we are seeing the outcome of that. So when we think of it, and that's when we talk about it later, when we think of it, how should we think of it? And what should we change when we think of, and in your introduction, you used the word ecosystems. I was so glad to hear that word. It's not said enough. We don't understand that word enough, both scientifically or acknowledge it as part of how we know something. But ecosystems is really about the web of life.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Malaika, would you like to go next?
Yes, for sure. Thank you so much to Avid and to Nayata and Asad and everyone who's behind the scenes as well for having me and everyone else here today. I actually think that, when it comes to wildlife filmmaking, I obviously got into it because I spent time in the wild when I was little and I went diving and all of that. But I'm going to tell you something more recent. So just an hour and a half back, I was on a mountain in Kashmir, where I am right now, and we're filming here. And we were filming with the critically endangered Hangul deer. There's only about 250 of them left in the wild today. And we were up on this mountain, my team and I were filming them. And I guess that's why I do it, right? I mean, there's a species that there's only 250 of them left in the wild. And if they go extinct, there's no more of them. And that's just one species of hundreds of thousands. And we probably know about this one because it's, exotic and interesting and it's in a cool part of the world. But there's so much wildlife and biodiversity that we're losing every single day. And I think I'm 24. I think my generation has been radicalized by that. We've grown into this. This is the world that we've known our entire lives. So for me, the reason I got into wildlife filmmaking was to tell stories about how humans impact the natural world and how we could actually be a part of the change, right? Because if we have the capacity to build incredibly large buildings and send people to space and have like flying machines to transport us from city to city, if we wanted to, and if we saw environmental conservation as a priority, we would be able to do that. And I think that's where storytelling comes in for me, because you will never do anything you don't think is important. You won't do stuff that you don't think even matters. And I guess that's where making documentaries for me makes sense, because that's the way that you can normalize things that should be normalized. That's the way that you can push the narrative that protecting the environment isn't just good from like an environmental perspective, but it's great from a more utilitarian perspective for the economy, for our health, for the communities across the world. And that's the perspective that I like to bring into the films that I make today. I usually work on wildlife films for National Geographic and the BBC and Discovery and Animal Planet. But with each of the films, we're very, very, very focused on ensuring that we don't just show you what is incredible about the natural world, but we also show you what's difficult we could actually do. I'm so excited to talk to you guys more about all of the work that you're doing.
Thank you. Thanks, Malaika. Actually, it's quite lovely. We had it really hard getting in touch with Malaika because she was in the middle of nowhere and had no signal, and we weren't even sure if she was going to make it for today's talk. And after all of that, her signal is better than my signal. So, Malaika, clearly it's better off. You're better off in the forest. Um, but Malaika, we had talked about the fact that documentaries have a very direct message, right, to an audience. There's nothing hidden, there's nothing cloaked, there are no layers. It's about speaking directly about an issue. I want to ask you, and you had mentioned a really interesting thing about the manta rays. Could you tell us how a film had actual impact and you saw what happened with the manta ray example?
So I think sometimes as storytellers, we take ourselves a bit too seriously. And I know I do that all the time. Like I'm terrible with this. I think that I know everything about everything, which isn't true at all. And sometimes, when you're making a film, you think that you and your team have the capacity to create real impact. And what I realized when I was making this film about the illegal trafficking of manta rays across Southeast Asia, that even though a story is really powerful, even though a story can like hit you at your heart and make you feel things, if it doesn't have a follow-up action, nothing's going to change. Like people are going to be sad about it. People are going to wonder that, oh, I really wish this animal didn't go extinct. But how do you actually translate that moment of awareness into something that changes stuff on the ground for real? So with the documentary that I made about manta rays, we followed the trade pipeline in manta ray gill plates, which is a contraband that's really, really valuable in traditional Chinese medicine, all the way from the wildlife markets in the ocean in India, in the southern coast, all the way up to the Manipur border where you see India and Myanmar intersecting. There's a lot of illegal wildlife trafficking that happens there. And also there's a lot of drug trafficking and smuggling and sex trafficking, and the people are often the same. It's the same people running everything. And then finally, we went undercover in China, where I pretended to be a business person. There's, to procure fish, which is a hard act to pull off, but I managed to do a little bit of acting there. And we came back and we found out that India is actually one of the biggest exporters of manta ray gill plates in the world. And then once I realized, okay, we're making this film about this, but how do we actually make this mean something? So I got this incredible organization that you would have heard about, the Wildlife Trust of India, on board to be our conservation partner. We got an anti-trafficking organization in the US to be our funding and our development partner called WildAid. And so we had this team of filmmakers and scientists and people who cared about policy all coming together. And because of the manta ray documentary that Untamed Planet worked on, we were able to get a year-and-a-half-long baseline data survey that tracks manta ray movement and tracks a lot of the landings of different species at different landing sites where they're killed for their plates. So now we actually have, a comprehensive data-based survey, and we are pushing for policy change. It's a tricky road. We don't know if we actually will make it, or if we will be able to protect these animals on paper in India's Wildlife Protection Act. But I think one of the things that taught me was that if you want to create real impact, filmmaking, and for me at least, filmmaking or the arts, they're really powerful mediums, but you have to really ally with scientists and with policymakers and with people who are running the show on the ground once we leave and go back to our cities.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I mean, it really, I cannot believe that you went undercover, Malaika. I often say I want your job. But Ravi, Ravi, you had also spoken to me about a really interesting, I mean, this is just trying to delve a little further into how, as artists, one can allow one's work to create a clear impact, and see what kind of change can come about. And Ravi, you had spoken about Nadir Prakriti, which was so fascinating. Please just shed some light on that and tell us a little about that. I'm sure everyone would love to hear about it.
So Nadir is a Gaelic word for nature. Prakriti is Sanskrit. It's a word I did around 2017 and 18 in Scotland, in Edinburgh. And I was looking at the common, the nature in Scotland, because we believe, like in many other places of nature, that these are natural. Actually, nothing is natural anymore. This whole Scottish landscape, we see on postcards is actually completely constructed in the 20th century. And all the rivers have changed, all the forests have changed, the plantations are all in the last 100 years. So, and the wolves have been exterminated, the people have been, there were the big highland clearances in the early 20th century where all the peasants were moved out. And tweed, and what we see, the kilt and the tweed was not in Scotland. There were imports into Scotland. So how what we see, the myth of nature was not how people lived. And you see the same things happening in India, displacement because of farms, people moving out, landscapes being, what is green being redefined, the place where Arunkumar works in the Western Ghats, there are huge water bodies there, which are, the whole area is changing very fast. How the appropriation of the word green has come about. So this project was looking at the idea of nature in two completely different geographical landscape, but also completely similar, because the same forces which change the Scottish landscapes are changing are changing the Indian landscape, and to show that that we are not very different in ways we have treated nature, and nature has been always outside the idea of of human society. It's only in the last 10-15 years that everybody's talking about sustainability. I remember when I started working on in environmental issues in the early 90s, it used to be a big struggle for anybody to recognize that this is a problem. And people said, oh, you're doing something on nature. What does that mean? Now, of course, it is the going sort of flavor of the moment. And in this, the idea of course, these were sort of works which involve lithographs, printmaking, copper etchings, and films, and working with communities in Scotland. So it's a big body of work. But the idea was to show that we are being shaped by the same forces. The same forces which are as Malaika said about and the ecosystem. We have two ecosystems. One is the ecosystem, the natural ecosystem, where there's a whole web of life. And one is the other ecosystem which is contesting with this, which is the ecosystem of capital, of human beings, of extraction. And these are sort of conflicting with each other, and nature is not winning, because we are now in what they call the sixth mass extinction. And why is it that happening? That's a question we need to address in a sense.
And I love the fact that you always say you like to just throw up questions.
I think as an artist, I have defined my own role as to make people think about something. And every artist defines one's own role as an artist. And I want people to think about things they may not normally think about. So when you see a landscape, what do you see? You see what you know, or are you missing something? So it's my job to show you what you're not seeing in some sort of notional way. And as an environmentalist, we do research-based advocacy work. There's a lot of science involved. So they're two different domains, but the idea is the same, is to how to make people more aware and think about something which we have missed. Because the climate crisis will not go away with I believe, just by changing fossil fuel, because it's not the only environmental crisis. We also in the moment of the Anthropocene. That means there are so many other things changing that, around us. And unless we change this relationship, this equation we have with nature, then I'm afraid that the planet is going to go from one crisis to another.
Yeah, I think that's the whole the problem right now, and I think many people are in search of understanding what this relationship is. How much does one stay in the situation that we're in right now, and how much do we give, how much do we move forward? It's actually quite fascinating, and it's ongoing. Like you say, it's not a crisis, it's a condition now. And so how do we treat that condition? Priya, I'd love for you to tell us more about Coral Woman and what you felt came out of that, and as well as your next project with it.
Yeah. So, like I said, when I started this project, I was not this aware. I'm still learning. But when I made the film and I started screening, I was very particular to start the screening from Tamil Nadu, where my film was located. And for my surprise, it was like people even in Tamil Nadu were not aware they had such a famous marine national park or a coastal belt. Uh, and so there started this journey that, there is a lot of gap between, what is happening and information, that big gap. So I strongly believe that, if people have a choice if they want to make a change or not. But they can make their choice only when they know that something is happening around them. When that hard reality hits them, then it's a choice. They want to do something. Change maybe like change can start at, like, at each person's house or each person's lifestyle. So that's when I started, like Malaika clearly said, that it's not just one film which is important. If one film could have made a change, like we would have been living in a beautiful
Yes.
world where there is no problem, because so much of work has been done by people. But what I strongly believe as an artist is, when someone watch a film and get updated, it's not just watching a film. It's not that after leaving the theater they just decide that from tomorrow I'm going to change the world. But they leave the theater, I strongly believe, that with a thought, with a discussion. It can initiate a lot of conversation. That might lead to a lot of change. Another thing was, this film was never made for children. I never thought my audience were children. It was mainly made for like people maybe 20 plus or something. But we had an exclusive screening once in Mumbai for some 200 children. And that was very different from any others, like 70, 80 screenings we had before. Because every time I had a screening, the adults were like, oh, this is really bad. They just sympathizes. But children, their questions were like, okay, a coral is bleaching. Can I do something at my house to stop it? Or a coral is bleaching. Can I do something to reverse it? So their questions were very action oriented. And like that really gave me a thing that, okay, I really trusted that bunch of children who are there and who wanted to do something. Then came this idea that I want to make a version of Coral Woman for children. And I'm so fortunate to say that Avid Learning partnered with us, came to know about this like this urge. And we are soon going to have a Coral Woman children's book, which talks about Indian corals and what is happening to them, what they can do. So that kind of thing. And I like I said earlier, we need to partner. Like, it's not like one individual, because the issue is huge. So we need to join hands, and things are happening. There are artists who are working around. So that gave an idea that why can't we do an art residency where artists, young people come together and we do an installation. So with Coral Woman, we have a film. We are bringing up a children's book. We want to do this art residency where a two-part installation is going to happen, which includes even an underwater installation. We also are doing like webinars every month, focusing on one state at a time and one topic at a time. So it might be a small bit, but I feel that the end product would be like multiple ripples created in multiple levels. We can reach out to different people. And there is, like, I always believe in hope. Like, so yeah, that's how Coral Woman led to an impact, and we are still working on it.
That's fantastic. And you know what? I completely agree with you. The kind of reaction you get from children, whether it is a film, even if it's a piece of art, I know that for some reason, because I was a performing artist, I used to go into school all the time with children and, try and use the arts to make them think creatively. And it was amazing how even if you show them a piece of abstract art, the kind of reactions that come from children actually teach us so much, and at the end of it all, they're the ones who are going to change the world. They're
I,
quite old
I just
now.
wanted to add one experience here. Avid Learning once organized this online painting sessions for children where they were taught how to paint corals. So indirectly, we were teaching them what is happening to the corals. And there was this one child. So the teacher was teaching them how to paint the corals. So there was this one child who said that I'm going to leave it white because this is what is happening to them. So that one child, that thought process was so amazing.
Of course, of course. Yeah, I'm looking forward to the book. I think I'll read it. um, Arun, tell me, how do you think that art residencies can help spread the message of conservation?
Okay. See, the kind of terrain that I'm coming from, the Western Ghats, is quite remote, and then people live actually in the wild. And so, uh, people have their occupation is predominantly agriculture, and they have a lot of time, and even the crafts and everything is fading away because of this climate change. They don't have raw materials like different kind of grass, and even the bamboo, and everything is going away, so the craft is also dying. So even in my own home, I used to see my grandmothers and mothers making mats and different kind of household crafts. So it's not there anymore. So you know, uh, in a place like this, arts need to come in again. So that's where infrastructure like this, a center, a platform where people can come together, and artists can come, and art is made a subject of discussion, and that's where the change starts, and then people again find interest in their forgotten craft, let's say. So basically, what I experienced was, went to art school, and learned something which is slightly different than what a rural a segment understands. So I lived. Still, I spent a lot of time in Delhi. So I find it really difficult to use my artistic experience back home. So that's how I just thought of starting with a place, and bringing in young artists and many artists to visit the place and stay there and understand the local needs and issues, and then maybe address it in their own way. So when you have a kind of residency kind of atmosphere, people do have a lot of time, and they have nothing else to, spend time. They get into in a local communities. Then again, why I needed this a space over there is, it is not easy to gain trust of the local communities. It takes a
Yes.
lot of time. It takes a lot of time, and then major issue is they are more suspicious of people coming from outside. Though I'm not coming really from outside, though I come from that place, but still we have this mistrust issue with outsiders and community. So to develop that trust, you need to have a long-term you know kind of association relationship, and giving them equal opportunity to share their ideas and learn from each other and all this. So I mean, only a space like this, whether you call it a residency or a platform, whatever, so that can function. So from there you can get into communities and address their issues. Also find alternatives, sustainable alternatives for their daily life. So that builds trust, and then that will turn better result. So that's what the SARA and myself engaged and also engaging local artists like theater personalities and theater activists, or writers, environmental activists, this place becomes a kind of forging space. So that's why this kind of space is very important. I mean,
Absolutely.
yeah, yeah.
I always feel actually that the arts are so interdependent, and it actually widens one's artistic perspective also when you have this cross-disciplinary exchange that does take place. And of course, it must be even more enriched at SARA because it's also urban and rural coming together. And like even Malaika said, that it's so important even as artists to work with not just artists, but even scientists or people who can. I think we just have to keep enriching ourselves the more we spread ourselves out to other influences. And I'm sure Sarah just does such an amazing amount of stuff with the local people. So it's really quite fabulous. Moving on now to the notion of ecotourism and national parks. They say that research by Intergovernmental Science Policy Platform on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services has said that up to 1 million species of plants and animals could disappear in the coming decades. And if unsustainable human activity, climate change, and habitat degradation are left unchecked, right? So, in our ongoing quest for sustainability, the importance of active conservation of nature and wildlife cannot be underestimated. So, in certain national parks and forest reserves, we are encroaching on the local wildlife's territory by building more lodges, facilities, tourist amenities. And yet, the belief that tourism can actively help conservation is another theory that many believe in. So I'm going to start with Malaika. Malaika, we spoke about tourism, and I come from a tourism family as well. But of course, there are these conflicting theories, and I think there is a middle path that one does need to tread. But you had spoken. I'm going to I'll remind you of the Nagarjuna Tiger Reserve example that you had given to me when we were chatting. Would you just tell us first your thoughts on tourism?
Yeah. So I think one example that kind of elucidates this point in my perspective on this is, for the longest time in parts of Indonesia, whale sharks were being killed, right? And people who sold their parts and sold them to the wildlife markets all across the world would get, a decent amount of money. They would get, say, equivalent to 40,000 Indian rupees for the local fishermen. But when they started bringing tourism into the area, that same species was able, like you could, like hundreds of thousands of divers could see that same animal, and the kind of revenue that brought into the local economy was so much better. And as a result, conservation happened because people were able to put a monetary value to wildlife. So I think tourism can be incredibly, incredibly important. I've been to lots of national parks in India where, the big ones like Ranthambore or Bandhavgarh, I think a lot of the conservation that happens today is because they were fenced off. Fencing off isn't, it sounds like a bad thing, but sometimes fencing off areas of land for wildlife protection is important. We need to have sacrosanct wild spaces where there's no intrusion, whether that's from a small scale Gujar farmer who goes in there with his livestock, or if it's from a big multinational company that wants to set up farm over there. We need to have inviolate spaces. Having said that, I would say that when we have these inviolate spaces, it's so important to have, like, to democratize access to them, because people who can afford to go into national parks can. It's expensive to go into a national park today. But for communities who've lived alongside wildlife, they've lived there their entire life, and then suddenly a fence comes up, and this is now someone else's land. This is a land that they can't walk through. And I understand if they can't go through it and they're compensated in terms of their livelihoods, and if they have other ways to, cook their food. But just in terms of their connection with that wildlife, which is often, a tenuous link to begin with, if we can find a way to democratize that access and allow them to go into the forest that they've existed in for centuries and centuries, that's when we can actually strike a balance between having tourism and looking after the needs of the communities. And in places where there is no tourism, like smaller national parks, or smaller tiger reserves or smaller conservation sanctuaries, the amount of poaching that you see is quite high because you have less eyes in the forest. The minute a place becomes important to our government and important to our local tourism economy, we will have more forest cuts, we will have more people, that place will be seen as important. So we need to figure out a way to actually do that with smaller national parks and places where you don't have the tiger, because very often when you have a tiger or an elephant or a leopard, it becomes an incredibly important national park. But I was in the Animalai Tiger Reserve, where there's barely any tourism in the part that we were in, the part that we were filming the purple frog in. And we saw this incredible species, the purple frog, that looks like it literally like descended from Mars. And it's not a tiger. You probably wouldn't blink twice if you saw it. It's quite frankly pretty ugly. But I think it's an incredibly important animal. It's important for its ecosystem. It's important for just it's even if it isn't important, it's important because it exists, and we have a right as stakeholders of the planet to ensure that we leave the planet better than we found it. And we need to figure out ways to actually protect places like that, and not just the big Ranthambores and Bandhavgars.
Absolutely correct. Priya, your documentary of salt farming that you spoke of opened your eyes also to the notion of coexistence. And you talked about the wild ass. Could you tell us a little more about it, and what the government had done and they weren't aware? And there is this notion of man-animal conflict, and just tell us a little about that.
Yeah, I feel like each time when I go to a state and do a film, it's the same issue in a different form, reflect like coming in each and every state. Like talking about Gujarat, I was filming with Agaria community, who are the salt farmers who have been doing salt farming for centuries. It's a not surveyed land, that's why it's called survey number 0, which produced 70% of salt in the country. And there is a very famous endangered species called wild ass there. You can see in most of the Gujarat tourism ads also there. There are safaris which are arranged to watch them, etc. And while I was talking to the community, they were having a conflict that they were not allowed to come and make salt, because this is something their livelihood, and they in centuries they have been doing the same thing. And one day an official is coming and say that you can't enter into the desert because it is endangering the life of wild ass. So there was a personal experience where I was filming with a young girl who was in her 15 to 18, that age group, and she had a camera. And I remember she was showing me the photographs which she had clicked. It was actually a foreigner who gave her that camera in the beginning of the salt season, and the plan for the foreigner was he will come and collect the camera at the end of the season. So different exploitation, another topic. But her images was such a proof that the wildlife was coming so close to them without any fear. At the same time, like while I was passing by, the wildlife, as soon as they saw us, like they were running away. So we are actually the outsiders. The same story happened when I was filming in Wayanad, where a tribal community called Kattu Nayakar was there. And elephants are there, like the biggest, like the great connection with the elephants. And even in their vocabulary, when they say us, which means forest, them and animals, and when they say they, it is us, the people who decide you can't enter the forest. And even that little child there, he knows how an elephant, what's the mood of an elephant. Is he angry, or is he happy, or he can just pass by? So, and the same thing happened even in Tamil Nadu. There is a marine national park. There is a community who was depending on the coral islands which are there. There are 21 islands in that coast. And since it's a marine national park, they are not even allowed to go and do fishing there. So this conflict was there in every state in different forms. Whereas like people somewhere sitting outside is actually deciding, or actually it is actually like how the partition happened. Someone just decided, just draw a line, and then just decided, okay, this is India and this is Pakistan. The same thing is happening with environment. People who are actually like coexisting, their views and their voices are never heard. I'm saying, like, people decide certain decisions and rules, and yeah, there lies a huge problem in multiple ways.
Arun, at SARA, since we were talking about SARA, you use art as a medium to communicate and express and share opinions and spread awareness as well, very clearly. How can this method actually be used in wildlife preservation and in ecotourism? Can there be a role to play there?
Sure. See, what we need at the moment is a lot of awareness. Awareness with the youngsters, awareness with the locals, and also outsiders. So what we are doing majorly is various types of awareness campaigns. So I have a small 3 minutes film. If Ayesha can bring it on, so that can show us that what all we have been doing it, and so we do have more strategies to create more awareness and also get into the communities. Yeah. So can we start from the beginning? Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you can see that the location is the Western Ghats, and this is where people gathering for various events, um, and, uh, and also we have seed banks and farmers gatherings, and this is a kind of information on local ecology through art, though it is still incomplete. It's in progress. So these are types of soil, seeds, and these are we have something like 115 types of rice varieties and food
Beautiful.
and things like that. So this is about the center. This is also part of the center where we also have information about art and civilization. This is still upcoming. This is not complete though. So we've started community outreach since last 4 or 5 years. We did eco walks in 2017 and 18 with about 150 artists, contribution of posters, art posters. So we walked for 6 days, with interacting local schools and villagers, and graffitis by younger artists.
Fabulous.
Yeah, and this is how this moving exhibitions in various places, having a short stopovers. And in 2018, we wanted kids to take over this, and they group of children who are associated with us, they took on this, and they led the walk of 4 days. So reaching out to almost 10,000 kids. And we also
Fabulous.
have art workshops and other things. So we also have a program called Swagrama. It's completely dedicated to the community. We have taken about 4 villages, and we have continuous interaction with them, meetings, and also working for their needs like water security and other needs. So we have been really working constantly on it, and some of these lakes were never, desilted. So I mean, I'm just showing a few slides here. That's all.
It's
But
fascinating.
yeah, so and basically what we are trying to do is creating awareness. At the center also, we have we still have some content management. So after that, we would like to invite school teachers and children. So once they're aware of what the region has and what we have and what we don't have and what we have lost in the last 40, 50 years, you can imagine in last 40 years we have lost 45% of forest cover. That means we have lost that much of wildlife, and I can't really tell you how much we have lost. Only when you are there at the ground, we realize how what kind of the transformation it has gone through in the last 40, 50 years. So, we are just trying to somehow highlight, these mismanagement, the environmental mismanagement, and maybe in the name of development also. So, we just need to create awareness for balanced, developmental programs, or this thing. So this is
Do,
majorly.
do people from neighboring areas come there to see all these exhibitions? I know what you've done is very clever, where you've had traveling exhibitions.
Yes.
But do people also come to where SARA is as tourists?
See, we haven't really opened it but we do have many workshops, summer camps, and farmers related workshops, and talks, and training camps, and all this. But it's because of the pandemic, our work also got stalled, and we are in the process of inviting school teachers meetings. Like, they have our one taluk has about 650 school teachers, and they do meet every month. So we are planning to have them in our center for their meetings, and then they will get to see, and then so that they can also get educated, and also bring their students for you know extra information, and interaction and experience. And we at the center, we also have a small forest land where we are raising biodiversity. We have about nearly 300 species of plants and trees since last. This is all raised, or I must say, revived in the last 8 years. So at one place, you can see so much. We also have about 40 types of bamboo. So there is so much to see when somebody comes in. So that's how, and I believe, forums like this need to be there every taluka levels, so that they have enough exchanges of their ideas and issues. So that's what our experience is so far.
And the conversation continues,
Yes.
for them. And I think what just sort of emerges even as we go along with this session is that it's very important to include the people from there.
Yes.
Because they are the ones who know that area, that land, that weather. So it's very, very important to educate them and empower them to be the change makers there.
Absolutely. So I can just add
Um,
one more thing.
yeah.
The Western Ghats region is very unique, and it has a very different, uh, system of water management, and there's no underground as such. There is a granite underneath, and not many knows the system, and only forest can manage this very well. So if we don't have forest, we don't have water, and we don't have biodiversity, and we don't have soil management. I mean, it all happens just
All
because
interlinked.
there is a forest. Yeah,
Yeah. And everything is interlinked.
absolutely.
Ravi, you've explored the theme of the relationship between man and nature very often. And with people now shifting to slower living and traveling, what is your opinion on this so-called lifestyle trend that's picking up? And do you feel that the arts can draw people's attention to this?
Yeah, I mean, surely I'll just answer it a little differently, and just to take on the earlier questions you asked about ecosystems and
Yeah.
all interconnected in a sense about tourism, is all interconnected. And tourism itself is not bad. It's the kind of tourism we need to have. But I think we should also recognize that the biggest destruction of natural systems is not because of tourism. It's because of mining, extraction, through displacement, through building dams. These are where, because if you map, for example, where the most resources are in India or in most parts of the world, they're under forest systems. So the reason they haven't, nobody's taken them out is because they're under forest. So you have to destroy the forest to do that. It's happening in the Amazon, it's happening everywhere. So the biggest destruction of natural systems is not because of individuals doing this and individuals doing that. It's because of whole systems of extraction. And the question is that after so many years, and there's such a big history of the separation of man and nature, fencing the forest, as what Priya just mentioned. Mahesh Rangarajan has written a book in 1994 called Fencing the Forest, the colonial history of how forest and people became separate. And I think this interrelationship is what ecosystems are all about, and we don't recognize it enough. And I think if I worked a lot with fishing communities for many years in South India, and there's nothing I can tell them. They're teaching me. So I think we are the people who need to be educated by what nature is. We have absolutely nothing to tell them. They understand systems intuitively because the relationship between arts, culture, and lives are not separate. Art is not separate from life. The whole culture derivation, the whole mythology, the festivals are dependent, are evolved from this relationship with nature. So a fishing community, all the festivals will be about the sea and worshipping the sea. And all the songs, the language will reflect the sea. So we have, as outsiders, separated this and we have recognized that relationship. I just want to show one photograph of a work I did relating to your question on a slide. The second slide, if Aisha can show about the vultures. It's a very interesting story about the decimation of vultures. Many people know it. But you know, in 20, 25 years back, there were 40 million vultures in South Asia. In the next 20, the next 20 years, 97% had been decimated because of one painkiller, which destroyed the kidney of the vulture. So we have a decimation of an ancient species, which you see in Ramayana, which you see in Cleopatra's Crown,
Yes.
decimated in 20 years. About 38 million vultures got extinct. So this is what, you know, this famous writer called Tom von Duren writes about functional extinction and how extinctions are happening all around us. The question is, despite all these conservation efforts, why are we still in the middle of extinctions? Why is it being said that ecosystems will, so many species will disappear? We've lost 163 avian species in the last 500 years, completely extinct. So these extinctions are very much part of, and they tell another story. Because when you take something like a vulture out of the ecosystem, you're not just taking a bird out, you're taking a whole culture out, you're taking a whole human-bird dependency, and including in the Parsi community in Mumbai, where the vulture is integral to the culture of the community. Similarly, the reasons why the South Asian vulture got extinct because of its close relationship to communities. The African vulture has not got extinct because they're more staying in forests. So this relationship is so critical. This is an intervention I did in the Natural History of Natural History Museum in Delhi, which is unfortunately burned down now. And it was an intervention in the museum because the only two vultures left in Delhi in 2009 were the two vultures in the diorama in the museum. You could not see. And I had grown up taking pictures of vultures nesting the Delhi Rich Forest just 10 years, 15 years back. And today you cannot see, except maybe sometimes it might say lone vulture. You cannot see vultures anymore. So I think the question is that are we doing enough? And I think it again brings to the whole point that when you cannot take from nature endlessly. And fishing communities in the forest community do not take from nature endlessly. They take what they need. And they have a reciprocal relationship. There's a filmmaker, Nilanjan Bhattacharya, who's made a lot of films on food cultures of indigenous communities. And they say, if we'll take part of the plant and put the other part back because we know we have to come back the next year. So it's a codependence. It's not that you don't take, it's you take with respect. And this respect and humility we have lost. And you can
Yeah.
see what's happening. It's not that you can see the result of it. We are in the climate crisis, which they're saying can destroy mankind. We are in the sixth extinction. We're the most destructive species, but we can be something else. So this is the relationship issue, which I think we have to learn from people who live with nature, that you have to respect it. You cannot take whatever you want. You cannot have the lifestyles you have right now without destroying something else. Everything we use comes from nature. Every fabric, every piece of wood, every piece of metal, every stone, everything in our built environment, the bookshelf behind me, everything comes.
Correct?
We don't produce anything. So
Yeah.
then, how much should we take? And I think that's the critical question facing us today.
Ravi, that's such a lovely thing actually that you said that of course we should take from nature, but we just have to make sure we give back. I mean, if you look at it way back, we only took from nature at that time before we developed synthetic material. But it's not about the taking, it's about the giving back, which is extremely important to enable some kind of balance and
And,
to, heal the world, really.
and as Priya mentioned, no, she was talking about the indigenous forest communities. And if you, I know artists like Navjot Altaf, who spent a lot of time in, she's a famous artist in Bastar. And you should hear her stories, or other artists who have, I have stories to tell about fishing communities. The stories actually, you can just keep quiet because you know that there's so much we have lost in what we believe we know.
Yeah.
And it's not about knowledge, it's about a way of life, a way of being. How do you be in a place where you are in a respectful place with humility in a landscape? And as we know, even today, that science is telling us that the landscapes are so complex that we are only starting to discover the complexities. You know, uh, they're all interlinked. And if you take it also that the human body has less human cells and more microorganisms as cell. And this biologists are saying that. So we are all sort of coexisting. We are formed with each other. And if you don't see this relationship, and somewhere we started believing we are separate from the animal,
And bigger.
and we are bigger, but are we? And there's so much talk, like Jane Goodall talks about her relationship with the chimpanzees and how she learned about them, how they reciprocated. So we are not the only intelligent being, and there's not only one kind of intelligence. So
Of
I really
course.
need some humility today.
Of course. Arun, you've worked extensively through SARA. Sorry, you've worked extensively through SARA in spreading awareness with local communities. I'd like you to just tell us a little more about Swagrama and Deeds of Development.
Yeah, I just showed you the small film, and in that you saw various, the very basic idea was, we can't stay outside and tell, others or villagers or locals that, you should do that and you should do this. So I think our idea was that it was to be with them, understand, and develop the trust and see what are the issues and what are the solutions, what has happened in the last few years, the sustainable ideas, all that. So we thought, to take one model, that is Swagrama. It's based on Gandhiji's village Swaraj. We didn't really think that way, but when we put together everything, it was very similar to Gandhi's village Swaraj. So basically, as I told you some time back, that crafts is gone away. So the village was sustained with all that they needed, from ropes to mats to everything, and baskets and everything. Today, if you come to those villages, potters, out of 50 potter families, the only one family is continuing, only occasionally. So, and there is no bamboo and there is no bamboo work. And as I said, there used to be different types of grass that was used for making mats. That is not available anymore. So what are the alternatives? And because of this, deforestation, and we have less rainfall, uh, the agriculture work is only for 4 to 5 months. The rest 7 months they are free. They go to the cities, or they stay, and it is, we have a lot of issues. So if we don't understand, stay outside and assume that they are the ones, but actually they are the for me, the villagers, or the farmers are the real guardians. They are the guardians of biodiversity, and also the wildlife. So
Absolutely.
yeah, so if we don't understand what their problems are, then there is no point. So that is why we thought, let's work with them, and work with them, using the existing government system, like there is a horticulture department, agriculture department, forest department, and every department is there. But do they really go there, and does anything changes with that? So we are basically trying to understand all this, and we are taking officials to the villages, and and as I just said, we made a few lakes, revived few lakes, and that was not desilted for many decades. So, and now they are doing fisheries, and suddenly they have so much light in their eyes. So I mean, we are basically trying, we are also trying to understand what we lack, and we are also trying to learn, and we are also trying to maybe bring
Empower.
opportunities,
Yeah.
economic opportunities. In the same At the same time, uh, you know when they are aware, we are not just doing this much, but we are also trying to tell them indirectly many things, that how forest is important, and how, if the forest is there, then everything else is there. So all that comes as a package. So that's how our the Swagrama thing is working, and the deeds of development is still in the making. That is about we have many case studies within the region. Like we have, since last 40 years, the government had given a permission to grow acacia for paper mills and other industries. So we have those 40 years of experience, how that invasive a plant imported from Australia has destroyed not only the local biodiversity, and also destroyed farmers occupation, and livelihood. Like we had a lot of forest food. Because of this invasive plant, we have lost the biodiversity which is available from the, like, especially the forest food for the villagers. That's gone. A lot of things. So other thing is, again, most people know that endosulfan of Kasargod, that's also about 30 years of a case study, that we can use that as a case study, and throw light about this chemical farming around so around our area. So things like that.
Yes.
We have many case studies, so that we will just put it up. Maybe for the government or others, it is just one way accountability. For us, we have to show the other side of accountability. What is, like, loss of biodiversity, or loss of culture, and various things. So that is what about deeds of development and citizens account. So that's what is we are trying to do.
Thanks. Priya, you had, again, because we're talking about the importance of the local communities, you had spoken about this amazing underwater installation that you are looking to work on. But again, you mentioned that it was not about just planting something there, you wanted them to own it. Can you tell us something about that?
So I completely agree with all the panelists how much importance they were repeating the same thing, the relationship with community and environment. Because I
Yes.
don't think if we are doing any art or any change, we can't keep that away. So even with our webinar, because there is a lot of limitation of technology and language when it comes to webinar and events like this. So we once had a session which was focusing on Odisha coast, and we made sure that a community person represent that conversation
Yes.
because the topic was climate change and community. And we brought a woman, and also when it comes to climate change and environment, we completely forget women, the gender aspect as completely. So
Correct.
a woman fisherman actually represented that. And when we are going to have a art residency from November, it will be virtually, and in February we'll have the residential part. So 5 young artists are going to come together and build a two-part installation. So in that we have 3 young artists, and we completely acknowledge the importance of a researcher, subject expert. So we have a 4th member like that, and the 5th person is a community person, who will bring that knowledge and experience onto the platform. Because I feel that the art we build should reflect what, like, which should reflect the ground reality. And I thought, like, if some artist coming from some state, coming from Delhi and making an installation doesn't give justice to what we intend to do. So that community representation was like, I don't care, like she had built a sculpture before or something. It was not important, but that knowledge she has was something which the artists are not having. So a combination of all that is going to happen in that art installation. Yeah.
It's fantastic. Really, really fantastic. Um, I'm just looking here, and there are lots and lots of questions that have come from the audience, and I'm just a little concerned about time. So I'm just going to jump in and start taking questions from them. Hold on. So someone has said, I'm keen on introducing children to environmental issues from the pre-primary level, and not for a separate subject, but teaching concepts through nature. I feel that we need to put nature at the center of our awareness rather than on the periphery. As artists, can you suggest how very young children should be exposed to conservation issues through the arts? Malaika, would you or could you lead this a little? Two things with what you had mentioned about different cuts that you do for children.
Yeah. So we recently worked on this documentary on elephant trafficking, and it was for kids. It was for the BBC's Kids Division, and I think the process of working in that taught me a lot about how to, tell better stories as well. Because so often we create these films that are really, really intellectual and full of nuance and all of that, but it can get boring, and it's imperative with communicating the extinction that we're facing today, to tell stories that are exciting and tell stories that are really fun as well. So I think we've kind of pivoted the storytelling style at Untamed Planet, and we started to tell stories that really integrate adventure, integrate. So I spent a lot of time, diving and hiking and riding horses, and we try to integrate that into films, because then people come for that, and then you can actually get them to staple stuff that really matters, which is how do we protect our planet better. We try to integrate interesting humor. We try to integrate, different kinds of local community voices, like basically stuff that gets you hooked. Because otherwise, what I realize happens, not just with kids, but in general, is that you have these echo chambers with people who know what they're talking about. Like, we all know that conserving the environment is important, but how do we get someone who might grow up to be a miner, or how do we get someone who actively consumes sharks today? How do we get someone who does not believe the environment is important at all to believe in this and watch these programs? The way is to make them exciting, to make them similar to stuff that they would want to watch, regardless of whether or not there's a message that's attached to it. So I think with kids especially, because their attention spans, actually I don't know if this is like politically correct. If there's a kid in the audience who might be very upset, but attention spans can be a bit shorter. So it's important to tell stories about the wild in a way that's exciting, fun, really fast-paced as well, and also action-oriented. I think that my generation and generations below me, people who are younger than me, don't just want to know about what's happening. They want to know about how they actively can play. And as Priya mentioned, the kind of questions kids ask can be very, very interesting, and they always want to know about how they could actively make a difference in their community. And very often, yeah, they can make a little bit of a difference. It might be token right now, but the point is that when they start making these kind of bits of differences in their lives and in the lives of their families and communities, it might not matter in the larger scheme of things. But when they grow up to be someone who is in a position of power, whether they're the next Narendra Modi, whether they're the next person who's running like Adani, whether they're the next person who even runs a small little school in the middle of nowhere, when those kids are actually in power one day, hopefully they can kind of tap into those experiences, watching these stories and looking at this art and kind of just imbibing that.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I'm going to just pop in here and add my little two bits to this answer. Again, because I come from a theatre background, I used to work a lot with children, and in the pre-primary time, I had to sometimes just look after the children. So I would take photographs of the wild. I used to take the Sanctuary Nature Foundation calendars, actually, that had fantastic photographs, and I would show them to these children and ask them, if there were two animals in the photograph, I would ask the children just to imagine what one was saying to another. It was all about imagination, but it was so interesting, and the kind of humor that would come through from the children, because they don't see it as tragedy. They don't see any of this as tragedy. They look at it as what their mind takes them to, and their minds are beautiful, and through that we would have little conversations about nature. I'd make them count using shells, and then we talk about various things related to shells. Where do the shells come from? I'd make them do take different types of soil and do, it was all reusable, because it would just be in a jar, and they would take the soil, or they take tiny pebbles or sand, and they would actually create shapes with it. So there's so many ways in which you can engage with them and actually teach them stuff that's part of your syllabus, but just draw from nature. It's actually great fun. Also, adding to that, I think Priya is going to be writing this book, which is going to be specifically for children about coral. So, Priya, just tell us what the name of the book is, so that teachers would be aware of it.
Book is named as Coral Woman itself, and it will be published in partnership with Avid Learning and HarperCollins. We'll be soon having a announcement about it, and the books will be reaching next month to stores. So it's especially for children. I shared some photographs which are sketched by children. Like over the last few years, we have lots of postcards, and even the book will be having paintings done by children. So it's something which they can own, I think. Yeah.
Thank
I
you.
would definitely recommend, please check out Avid Learning platform for more information about the book.
Okay. If you can put a link there, Aisha, it would be great. Some of these questions actually we have covered as as we've gone by. So I'm just sort of scanning them. Malaika, how are films on the subject such as Our Planet documenting and recording the adverse impact of human activities on fragile ecosystems and portraying them for different audiences?
Wait, was that referencing Our Planet that's on Netflix? Or?
Yes.
Okay, got it. So I think, there's people who have very strong opinions on this, who believe that, we should not have nature documentaries that only show how beautiful the natural world is. I used to be one of those people, so I can say that I now have changed my opinion. I think there's enough space on our planet for different kinds of storytellers. We can have people who tell stories about how stuff is isn't going well, and how there are challenges to our environment, and how there are solutions, people who are literally at the forefront of it, whether that's scientists, researchers, innovators, or communities. But then there's also a space for celebrating wildlife and having a sense of community and a sense of pride, a shared pride about our natural resources. And I think that films like Our Planet or, Closer Home, Wild Karnataka, these kinds of films actually help people to fall in love with the natural world. They help people to kind of say that, hey, we get to live on this incredible planet, because it's very easy to forget that sometimes when you live in a city. So I think that even though a series like Our Planet might not be the best in telling stories about how our changing planet is being impacted. I think there's lots of other documentaries by the same network and by other networks as well that really go into the specifics of how we can protect the planet. I think one of them, I worked in the series with SARA, and there's tons of other films that they've made, which is called Earthrise, and it's completely focused on solutions. So there's no pretty images. I mean, there might be a couple of pretty images, but it's all focused on solutions and people who are changing the world right now. And there's tons of programs like that. So I think that we do need to have a mix where you have programs that are actively hitting those targets of getting people to understand what the solutions are, and then really cool, amazing programs that you can watch on a Christmas night or a Diwali night with your family and just be, impressed with how amazing our planet is.
Thanks, Malaika. Ravi, this is a question for you. Many people are now shifting to sustainable and recycled art made of toxins and plastic. What is your opinion of it?
So, I mean, at least they're engaging with it. So I will say it's a step in the right direction, because now you're trying to engage with the problem. You're focusing on it. And we need to do more than that. So the idea of toxins is the landscape which I mentioned you don't see. So what's inside your plastic, what's inside other materials, what happens when recycling releases this, what happens to human health, what happens to the water and to the wildlife. These are things we need to deepen. But 15 years back, we were not even thinking of plastics. So at least now we are. So I like to support this positive view. And what Malaika said, we need all kinds of films. So because no one film can tell you everything, but we need to not be ostrich-like. We know it's beautiful and there's a problem. And so I think the more the exposure is, the better it is. There's no easy solution to it, because we are in the deep end of the swimming pool, and to get out, we need all our facilities. So I think we should encourage all positive and take it further in the right direction.
Thank you so much. And it looks like we've come to the end of our session. I could go on speaking endlessly with the four of you, but thank you. And thank you for being as wondrous as you are, for your fabulous artistic skill, and more so for your beautiful heart and constant caring for the planet. I hope that you keep spreading the message and always stay the fantastic change makers that you are. Thank you. Thank you, Asad. Do you want to take over?
Sure. Thank you, Anahita, and to our panel. Generally at Avid sessions, I make copious notes, which I cannot read ever. But I actually can read some of these at the moment. And I love the saying that was said, like, everything we have comes from nature. How much should we take and how much should we give back? I think that kind of summarizes it. I want to start with Anna for my thank yous. Growing up as a child, I think she and me both read Century magazines. And that was something that kind of impacted our foundation on wildlife, on conservation. And we have to thank the legend called Bittu Saigal for this. And the reason I chose Anna for this panel, because she and we worked on the Sanctuary Wildlife Photography Awards. So, that also is arts for wildlife conservation, and which I hoped we would get into, but we didn't. And also I'd like to thank my friend Mr. Ranjit Hoskote, who I lean on many often for some guidance, and he's a co-conspirator with Ravi, with Arunkumar, and everyone else for actually guiding us through this panel. And also, this Sustainability Now series, though we launched it last year, is not something that came up because of the pandemic. We were scheduled to start this in March of 2020. we just didn't let the pandemic stop us, and we just took it online, and we were going to start it at the CSMBS at the visitor center. So I have to thank our partners, the CSMBS, Mr. Mukherjee and Joyti, for continuing to partner with us, if not in the physical space, in the online space. But thank you most of all to this audience who've been with us. As I said, and I'm so sorry, before I go to my rest of the thank yous, there's one correction I'd like to make. The book Coral Woman is not written by Priya; it's written by Lubaina Bandukwala. Priya is the inspiration. Her film is the inspiration, and just like her, I also fell in love with the story of Uma Mani. And that book is scheduled to be launched towards the end of October by Harper, and it's been published by HarperCollins. And we've got many fun things planned for that book, for kids, for adults, for everyone. So as everyone says, just stalk us on social media and or on our website, and you'll be in touch. Our next session is on next Thursday, which will be a continuation of our series Cultural Capitals, the legacy of Indian cities, and we'll be looking at Lucknow. And followed by many more, but but thank you very much, guys. Thank you for tuning in, and always remember that learning never stops. Thank you and have a good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
Thank
you,
you.
guys.
Thanks a lot.